Good afternoon and welcome back to Civic Space TV. This is the Youth Roundtable, and a happy new year to you all our dear esteemed viewers. Welcome back to your episode. And in this new year, we are talking about key events that went ahead and shaped the year 2025 and our expectations for 2026. I am joined by Mr. Aruho Brian, a lawyer by profession. Very happy to have you here. I can say hello to the viewers.
Thank you so much, Drake, and thank you for Civic Space TV. I think it's a new year indeed. We are going to have a number of opportunities.
Yeah.
I'm very hopeful.
Thank you. Right next to Mr. Rufo Brian, we're joined by Ms. Kojo Sarah. Very happy to have you here, and a happy new year to you too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here. I'll come back from the village. Yeah.
Thank you. Last but not least, we're joined by Mr. Timothy. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you very much, Drake. I'm actually happy to be here.
Yeah.
Happy New Year to you. Happy
Thank
New Year
you.
to fellow panelists, and Happy New Year to the viewers.
Thank
I
you.
look forward to an insightful discussion.
Thank you. The year 2025, as I earlier noted, was a year that was characterized with a lot of events. From what we saw happening in Tanzania, the State of Nations address, of course, as a backdrop next to the budget that we saw in the year 2025, to the nominations of the presidential candidates, the primaries that happened, among other events. Those are just a few that I have to just mention. But most importantly, for the expectations of this year in this month of January, we are looking at the general elections that are just yet to happen in a few weeks or a few days from now. So let me start with you, Brian. Most importantly is in this conversation, I would think it's very imperative that you give us, for you, what are those key events that stood out for you in 2025 before we delve into ascertaining and breaking down the events and looking at, has our country made progress? Has it regressed? You know, just give us those key events that made news for you, made headlines for you in the year 2025.
Thank you so much, Drake. I think, firstly, I would like to, I think the very first event that made a key turn in Uganda's demographic in 2025 was the Supreme Court ruling on whether civilians can be tried in military courts. Then from that, you then come to the UPDF Amendment Act that was passed, that sort of counter-attacked that ruling and gave certain provisions of when civilians can be tried in military courts, certain degrees. And then the Afro-Arab Congress that happened, the diplomatic conferences that we had in Uganda coming to NAM and the related. Then the Venezuela incident, Venezuela and the US incident that closed up the year between the both presidents, Trump and the president of Venezuela, which sort of questions whether sovereignty is still an actual issue in international law. So amongst very many other things, I think to me those were the key things. Then obviously the election cycle.
Wouldn't you make mention of the Washington Peace Prosperous Accord?
Sorry about
because if you talk about Venezuela, then
yeah, obviously. I was taking more of the Venezuela because my issue with the thing of Venezuela is that this is actually on a president, whereas the Washington Peace Accord is more of countries. But the beauty, what scared me with the Venezuela thing is how you put arrest sanctions on a president, on a sitting president, and then you want to test his sovereignty. Just got me thinking, you know, when you do international law, it is quoted with good words and the movies.
But the question is international law or is it politics? That's a question that they ask in the international law class. But yes, thank you. And I think definitely areas to do with the Supreme Court ruling that we saw in the Kabaziruka case.
Yes.
That of course led to the UPDF Amendment Act.
Yeah.
You're interested in looking at the Venezuelan versus US issue that looks at the question of sovereignty, but also the Washington Peace Accord. That is to the extent that you think made your year 2025.
Sure.
Kojo,
Yeah.
how about you? What made your year 2025? What significant events stood out for you?
2025 was actually a very interesting year with so many major events starting from January to December.
Yeah.
Like it has been full of new stuff that, you know.
Yeah.
But what stood out was, of course, the election period where people started preparing long before the election started. We were seeing so many people coming up to be presidential candidates.
Yeah.
Were we became a laughing stock of nations. And it was quite interesting where people were arrested, the Kenyans that were arrested, and then the court was on an order for habeas corpus. They said that we don't have them, and then we see the president bragging about arresting them in one of his campaigns. Indian Ocean, of course, for the youths and all, which sparked a question that are we really preparing for a war? Like, is the president pushing Uganda to that extent of war? Then we're seeing refugees being refused, like Uganda passing a law, and not a law, but a statement that we weren't going to allow any more refugees in case of a new
refugees, particularly from Somalia, Ethiopia, and Eritrea,
and Sudan, because of the lack of funding. We are seeing.
Was that really the reason? I think the reason was that there is no existing threat in their nations that should give them the refugee status.
But the lack of funding was also there because they were saying that so many refugee camps now no longer have food and all, and then we are no longer going to accept any more refugees. But then that sparked a question for expectations for 2026, that now what if a threat comes in and we need to be as welcoming and as recipient as we've been in the previous years. That does quite stood out for me.
Interesting. Timothy, what stood out for you in the year 2025?
Okay, thank you very much, Drake. Year 2025 has had a series of events that actually happened, and in my opinion, these events have made this country and this region have brought some sort of deceptive calmness, in a way that we've had very many things happen. Looking in March, when we see the court rulings, when we see the Kabazuguruka case, when we come back to nominations, we come back to elections, we come back to youth elections that actually sparkled a lot of debate because they were the starting point of all elections. We looked about a state where teachers went on strike that students did not actually learn at all, some of them in our areas. And recently, yesterday, we've had some sort of event when the NUP flag bearer was actually denominated. And sort of such events have actually happened in 2025. And I think following those events, we are likely to have already prescribed 2026.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
So out of all these events, Aruho, your interest was in the Supreme Court ruling that happened in the Kabaziruka case that led to the UPDF Amendment Act, the Venezuelan issue. So we're going to categorize our discussion in terms of national, regional, and international. So on a national level, what the significant events that I think is very important to note, considering that we are in a political and electoral period, it's very imperative that we talk about the Kabaziruka case, the Supreme Court ruling, which I think informs the UPDF Amendment Act. A tool that some human rights activists argue and say that is a tool meant to oppress the rights of individuals in terms of fighting for the freedom of expression and association. Aruho, as of the year 2025, this was a very significant landmark ruling that of course sparked debates and conversations. But how does this therefore impact our democracy as a country, but also how does it affect us as we head towards the 2026 general elections, particularly from this significant event?
Thank you. I think we can draw this from the previous election cycle that we had, in that when you look at the Kabaziruka case, the ruling, if you look at it from the lay Ugandan perspective, is that this was a ruling that was meant to sort of put Ugandans at an equal table.
Yes.
In relation to access to justice, but then also equitable, application of the rule of law. The saying that if I'm a civilian, I ought to be tried in the civilian courts. If I'm a military personnel, to a certain extent, yes, if I've been tried, I can still reapply. Now, the Kabaziruka case sort of gave you a standard that no civilians can't be gotten. You can't get someone out of the blue and take them to a military court for trial. No. You should have exhausted all these remedies of the local courts. Now, to which we celebrated. People were happy and said, oh, this is a beginning of a breather. That was our normal thinking. And then you then saw the UPDF Amendment Act coming in. we live in a bubble. That's how I want to say it. You have the UPDF Amendment Act coming in. And yes, whereas people are saying this has taken away our rights, freedom of speech, I think it goes deeper, personally. It goes deeper to what you put on. Because it prescribed clothes that are entirely for the military. And
including
now,
shoes.
Including shoes, which some people business owners had already imported, which some people have been buying, for their own personal things. So from the point of what I put on to obviously your speech, but then most interestingly is the classification of military courts. I think there is sort of credit, but to the point of view that it says we can still try a civilian to a certain extent. I think now that's where we sort of lost it. The reason is, you see, rulings in courts, especially Supreme Court rulings, have effects, both directly and indirectly, in any country. For Uganda, the fact that we are in an election cycle, it means that at any one point X, you can be targeted as, the term is refusing to come, but you can be targeted as a political prisoner. And anything can come and say, no, this gentleman wanted to throw the government. And we're in an election cycle. What does that mean? It means that whereas you would have been taken to court, the normal procedure, you're going to be gotten. That is if people know where you've been taken. And the next thing we are seeing, you're being paraded in military court. The next thing we are seeing is you're being sentenced. And that's a game done. So I think in a nutshell, that the ruling of the Kabaziruka case gives sort of a fear into what people should say, especially in election cycles, and not necessarily the ruling party. It's more on a question of whether you agree with our ideology, also whether you agree with what the government in power says. So if you do not agree with them, that's on you. For them, they are saying, if we get you, we shall take you for a military hearing.
Okay. Kojo, my interest at the moment is still on the Kabaziruka ruling that, of course, we saw culminating into the UPDF Amendment Act. Brian rightly puts it in his submissions that this particular Amendment Act of the UPDF has significant clauses that will directly impact so-called political prisoners in terms of their dress code, in terms of what you say, and of course you will not be tried in a civilian court, and yet you are a civilian and be tried in the court martial. Now, still, on the aspect of the fact that this season and this month is an electoral month, but also an electoral season, we are going to witness the impact of this ruling that we saw in 2025 more significantly as we age towards the general elections. So what are your thoughts as an event that happened in the year 2025, the impact that this particular ruling later on we see in the Amendment Act have on our progress towards the general election, but also our democracy as a country?
Thank you so much. Considering the Kabaziruka ruling, when you read all 200 pages of it, you actually see the Supreme Court going ahead to explain the reasons why they made such a ruling. They talked of the history of those courts, and they said why they were no longer important in this day and era. And they gave reasons, so many reasons, including that they were no longer applicable because it was now a more peaceful environment. And not only that, is that those courts were actually held to be just a disciplinary committee for military people. And we see the president making a statement immediately after that ruling that this world or this country is not ruled by the Supreme Court, but by the ruling party or the person in power. And then we see the UPDF Amendment Act coming in and ruining everything. Now, in a situation where people are now being arrested left, right, and center for things like associating with a certain party or political party, we see that it is quite simple for military personnel to accuse you of wearing their boots or categorizing your shoes as something. And we see that the army has proved to us over and over again that they are no longer serving the interests of the people, but the interests of the people in power. I don't know if you get it. So we see that this Amendment Act came in and removed all reasons that the Supreme Court gave for a democratic kind of nation. So in this there an era of political uncertainty where we don't know whether we are going to repeat a saga of 2020 where people were shoot to kill and all. It is quite dangerous to have such a legislation in the country. So I'm not a foreteller and or a psych. I don't know what it's going to do, but it shows signs and over again that it's dangerous for people, especially people who are actively participating in politics and associating with certain political parties.
All right. Timothy, the same question applies to you. How does this particular ruling and the Amendment Act therefore affect, first of all, people who are engaged in the process of elections and directly affect this political season and this electoral cycle?
Okay, well, I think people in Uganda should actually understand the state of a country where they live or where they stay, because the Kabazuguruka case, it was some good thing that we all hoped and looked at as if it is a remedy for all of us. But then after a few days, the UPDF Amendment Act reigned it all. And then the question to ask the question should be, when the Kabazuguruka case decides that way, what has the government to do about it? Because for me, in my opinion, I think there is what is called executive pushback. Like she put it, it's clear that the courts of Uganda these days, they are not serving the interests of the people, but the interest of the ruling government. And that is why the president boldly stands enough to say that this country is not led by the Supreme Court. Decisions in this country are actually not made by the Supreme Court, but rather by us, the ruling government. And that is what it shows to people, that I actually want to tell the general public that still this country is under the ways it has been. There is no good thing within the Kabazuguruka case, because the executive pushback I'm talking about, it simply means what is within the favor of the government. Because before a court makes a ruling, the question to ask should be, to what extent will this ruling be accepted by the government?
But you see, if it's to that angle, then civilians stay at the angle of being in suspense, whether
It's
we are
no
still,
longer a democracy.
whether the country is ours or not. Because when you say, because now you're meaning you want it to become a political ruling. You say the whole purpose of courts is not to back up any government. I think it's to back up citizens generally.
But we've seen
That's why you have a high
courts
court,
refusing
courts of appeal and Supreme
being
Court.
in
I
line with
want to make this
the
one clear.
with the
I want
government
to
and
clear
all.
the air that I'm actually not letting citizens and civilians remain in suspense. I want to assure these citizens that they should actually disease it or get removed from that false confidence that the Kabazuguruka case, as it is in ruling, brought to them. Because anything at any time, you can't be convicted, you can't be accused of anything.
So you didn't want us,
Supremacy,
you didn't want us
the
to
Kabazuguruka
celebrate
case
it.
no longer stands, considering
It's a precedent.
supremacy of
But it's a
what?
precedent.
Yeah, it is.
Now, as a lawyer,
Case law
as a lawyer,
and
Yeah.
statutory law.
as a lawyer, you have reasons enough to celebrate it. But as a person who is not a lawyer, those people actually do not have reasons to celebrate it. Because for you as a lawyer, in your remedies, you feel like the court is doing reasonably well. But then the
But
effectiveness
it is,
of what the
because,
court...
because what happens among the sources of law, you have
You have a precedent case.
of course you have case law. that
Much
is-
as it's a precedent
so it
in the
is-
Supreme Court, the UPDF Amendment Act comes in and removes its power.
It says to a
Considering-
certain extent.
Remember, let me show you this. I actually believe that as I'm seated here, I'm the only person who is not a lawyer. In making,
No, I can also.
Then we shall understand and just let it go.
because let me show you.
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
show you one thing. Remember, as lawyers, the more you read, the more you relate to law. It is not how other people relate to law. There is what we call court of public opinion, and the
But
court of
that
public
is
it's
not a
not
source of
binding.
law.
It's
It's
not a
not
source
binding.
of
You see, what
No, like this is not a court of public.
we are
Yeah,
talking,
yeah,
it
we are
is.
talking and appealing to civilians. And these civilians are not lawyers. These civilians, they are other people. They are lawyers,
The
they are
ordinary
educators,
people,
yes.
they are businessmen, they are that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So when these people are there, they feel like they have to be engaged in politics. They feel like they have to do their trend the way they want. They feel like they should represent themselves in a way they want. But now, if they are politically confidenced in a way that this ruling was put there, the court decided the way it did, in as people should not be tried in civilian courts, and then in martial in
Court
UPDF
martial.
court martials, and then the UPDF Act comes and reins it all and shows that at any one point you can't be tried. Then that one is not actually to be celebrated by the civilians, because what was to be celebrated was the ruling, if at all it was to remain potent in that way.
Let me just hold you there and we just shift gears, because there are a couple of events we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Most importantly is one, the State of the Nation's address that gives birth to the budget. The budget that we saw that was read in the year 2025-2026 was up to a total of 72 trillion Ugandan shillings. And of course, we know that the public debt has now surpassed the 50% mark. And of course, among the items that at least significantly had some improvement in funding was an aspect to do with education, but also health as well. But of course, as most of the budgets that we've seen under the NRM government, is that we have significantly seen the army receiving a huge proportion of the budget. Of course, the justification is for purposes of promoting peace and security in the country. Brian, the budget is a conversation we'd like to have. And the fact that we have our debt burden as a country is increasing. As the year was coming to an end in 2025, you're seeing URA coming up with proposals to tax to tax individuals more, but also Ugandans who are in the diaspora and have items and business outside of Uganda, they intend to tax them. So let's talk about the budget and how the economy is faring, whether we are making progress or we're actually regressing as a nation.
Thank you. I'm going to give a twofold, I think, submission to that. One that is going to have this people question my ideological thinking, but one that I think is reality. One, I tend to major more in health law. So when you look at, whereas there was a significant increment in the health sector budget, but to me, I still feel like it was a drop in the ocean. Something very tiny, like how you have water for washing, and then you say, oh, my white shirt got a little stain, and say, let me throw in a little jig. I think the percentage that was increased in the health funding was very minimal. One, because we still have a national health insurance bill that has never been assented to by the president. We are fighting with that. We are still trying as a country to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic that we had. So we are still in a state of having had to reach areas suffering with access to the basic donor-funded medicines and medical trainings that you would call. Ministry of Health has still been fighting with that effect. And then you have a budget that is coming through and prioritizing what? Military funding. Another aspect of peace and security, which I believe is very key. But you see, at a certain point, you need to give people a certain leverage. A leverage in education. Those are priorities of a country. For long, the military has been funded with quite a good budget, which I have no problem with. But you need to significantly proportion certain amounts to the education sector and to the health sector. Why is when you have a sector of citizens that are also not all that educated, then you have a problem. But then second, when you also have a citizenry that doesn't have timely access to healthcare facilities, then you have a very big problem. Why am I bringing that? Is that before that budget was passed, we had seen, I think Uganda then was in the discussion of the Ugandans on Twitter were responding to an issue that had happened to the minister, Chris Bariomosi, where he got an incident up country, and guess what? He was flown, he was airlifted. And yet, and people were asking, the place where you got the issue from, weren't there hospitals? You guys say we have health centers for you, tell us to treat from here. Why didn't you get treated? Shortly after the budget was passed, towards the end of the year, you saw the Major General, Sabiti, Mzee Sabiti, get a crash. Is it in Zimbabwe? I think Zimbabwe is in one of the two. I think Zimbabwe. And then guess what? They had to wait for a military chopper to come all the way to come and pick him up. And people are questioning, so all that time, if it was a normal citizen, wouldn't you already be dead? Putting that aside, doesn't your area have first aid clinics? You say we have health centers for. So why don't you put them there? This person was airlifted. Shortly towards the end of the year, you have one of Uganda's richest people, Basajja Balaba, crying on the mother's burial and publicly saying, guys, when you have a problem in this country, we urgently need a national health insurance policy. If that is a rich person crying, what about us of well and 300,000, 400,000? This is Basaja Balala, a very wealthy guy, crying over what? The mother failed to get good treatment in Uganda. He had to airlift the mother to Nairobi. And the bills there were very sickening. So you understand?
Yeah.
Now it gets us to the question of what is our priority? I think in my view, honestly, is on the 2026-2027 budget, certain things need to be put right. One, funding to the healthcare sector, but then two, funding to the education sector. For long, we've prioritized the military, which is not a problem. But we also saw sort of a small cut in the finance budget, which I think sort of put public servants on the edge, and then you had them. I don't want to put it in a wrong way, but you see, when Drake, if you've been earning 500,000, and still we maintain the 500,000, but we tell you first help us and work for these 2 months without pay to Jakusasula in future. We are affecting how you run your family, because Drake might have 3 children, has a wife, has bills, has loans. So when you push him 2 months ahead, I do not think if Drake is a public servant, they still work with that morale of the country. My view is that if Drake gets a good deal, then we go back to the issues of embezzlement or extortion. It's not that Drake wanted to do it. It's just because Drake has no money. That is the honest reality. So it takes us back to, I think our budget, I think as a country, we still do not have priorities. The priorities that we put are priorities that long went. Issues of, we may have a military insurgents. I think we are past those discussions, really.
All right.
Yeah.
Kojo, what are your thoughts on the budget, 2025-2026? Do you opine with Brian that our priorities need to be set straight?
Yeah, I do. One thing I know concerning that budget is security, right? Security was given too much money and a bigger proportion of the budget. Now, this reminds me of my favorite poem that says that the state protects me with its machetes and guns. Yeah, the security is there to maintain peace, but not to maintain peace, but to intimidate citizens. You find that police are randomly deployed in the city to intimidate people from existing. The peace is there not to maintain order or something like that, but to keep people in a bubble and some kind of fear, so that people are living in fear, not to do anything, not to express themselves. The budget is a sign that it is not really a democracy. When you look at education, yes, it was given a bigger proportion in that budget, right? But concerning the presidential and the executive priorities in terms of education, where you see that science teachers are given more money than way more money than arts teachers. When I was talking to some professor concerning that, of scientists and artists being given less, they said that artists think and they are more of ideologists. Like they think of what would be better, what would take our country to a bigger level. You find that he referred to me in the times of Amin, where they removed political education so that people wouldn't stand up against the ruling government at that time. So it is like a same strategy in a different cloth. You find out that now, yes, much as the education system has more money and teachers are paid more, but the teachers who are actually more, when you consider science subjects and arts subjects, they are more actually. The teachers who are actually more, a bigger percentage of the education system, are not being paid. And you find that it's not bringing any effects or any changes in the country. You find that now people are striving to be more scientists, forgetting that everyone has a certain kind of talent or, to be a better human being. You find that not everyone is going to be a scientist, but the priorities of the budget actually show people the way to carry out their economic activities.
Okay.
You find that because of that unrealistic budget, and you find that we are borrowing more. One thing that disappointed me so much in 2025 was when we had to borrow so much money to hold that football thing in Nambole.
Chan.
Yeah, we didn't
Chan
even
game
win.
of
We didn't even win, but we borrowed so much.
We tried. We tried.
Yeah, we did.
participated.
But that doesn't remove the fact that we didn't win. But you find that people were watching football and having fun. Yes, it's okay to have entertainment in our country, but some districts don't have health centers. Some districts only have one school where
but
thousands
you
of
see,
students
Kojo,
go and study from there.
under Objective 17 of your constitution, that the national objectives and principles, Objective 17 provides for the right. Okay, it's not exactly binding, but of course, the intention of the framers of the constitution is that the citizens of this country have a right to sports and leisure.
They
So when it comes to the aspect of the budget in regards to promoting sport and leisure, then I think it is justified.
But when you look,
it's also a source of
sick
employment.
nation.
It's also a
It's a
source of
sick
employment.
nation.
To
I don't
contractors.
think
Yes.
a priority of a person who is uneducated and sick, unhealthy, without access to those funds and all. We see there's a case of Sehad and
there is something-
National Medical Stores.
No, I think you're a student of law, and you are quite aware when they say that human rights is interdependent and related.
They are.
So when you go ahead and infringe the enjoyment of one
But the
right,
thing is,
it can
it
significantly
wasn't an
affect the
infringement
other.
as such. We borrowed too much money where we were giving players $1 billion just because they have scored a goal. Can you imagine? In a country that is as broke as Uganda, you're giving away money.
But Kojo, you watched the matches.
Of
There was a
course,
spirit of national unity.
Of course, it was there.
It was there. You
But
also
that doesn't
posted.
remove the fact that the country has better and bigger priorities that it is supposed to focus on.
But for those seconds, those days, you loved the country. We all loved the country, right?
Yeah.
There was a spirit of national unity.
It was.
You promoted
But
the country
I'm
because you
saying
always
it was
posted.
misguided.
Was it?
The entire
But
situation
that's
was
enough. Okay,
misguided.
So what
We
should have
would
been done?
So what should have been done?
What would have been that with Uganda coming in? Because I know even if those people weren't given $1 billion, that much
So
money
what
to
should have
just
been
score.
given to them to appreciate them, because it was the president's money,
Right.
not the government's money.
The president is paid from the government, the taxpayers'
Let
money.
me just hold you there. Timothy, your thoughts on the budget, but also you can. Kojo's angle was she was attacking that the Chan Games.
We are borrowing so much money. We are
wonder if we
borrowing so
shouldn't have
much
posted.
money, putting it in the wrong places, and then we have. Yeah,
But
we're
no,
considering
indirectly.
the country.
Indirectly,
And
it
right
gives
now,
the tool of
right now,
investment.
does it really matter? Does it really matter that we invested that much money
But we
in
got
sports?
some investors
Considering
now.
people are dying, mothers are dying, the maternity health rate is still dropping. People are still
Is
dying.
it dropping or rising? But let me just.
Yeah, something.
Prime Minister said we give birth to a lot of people. So I don't know.
Because people are not educated, you know. that
Timo,
brings it
it's
back
all right,
to priority.
It's all right.
Timothy, on your thoughts on the budget, are our priorities straight, or you also still have your peculiar observations like that of Kojo?
I really want to start from where she ended. Because look, her point of view is not giving that sum of money to players as in appreciation, but her point of view is that we borrowed a lot. And which of course I think that would not have been the case of borrowing. This Ugandan country, in as much as he quoted, it is a very poor country. But for me, I suspect Uganda is not too vulnerable. It is not too poor to the extent of borrowing that. It borrows in that way because some of the things are not given priority. Look, when players are given that amount in appreciation, I actually agree with it. But the fact that you borrowed that money to give players, I don't agree with it. Now,
let's just get some facts straight. The president said he's getting this money. He promised from his own. He did not say he's speaking it from the coffers
Yes.
of Uganda. That was his own form of appreciation to the players.
The president of Uganda has no his own money to the Ugandans.
There's-
So you want him to be broke?
The
There's
president
there's
of
a video
Uganda
I
has
saw
no
of-
his
of
own
the
money to the
president when he
Ugandans.
was
Now,
still
look,
young,
what I
and
was
he
going to
like-
tell you about is, instead of borrowing this money, because if you say it was his own and yet he borrowed,
Then
and the
the-
taxpayer is the one to pay that, to repay that money, then there I don't get.
I think
Because
the
we
borrowing
are
was
still
on
going to have a
organization of
very,
charity.
Yes,
we are
the-
going to
not
be having a
remuneration.
very
Because-
big debt after the president and this government
Okay.
has
In
gone,
Uganda, they
and
allow-
we are still going to suffer
allow
the
me
One,
to
it's
say
not going to
those
fall.
those
The government is not
impulse-
going to fall.
Allow me to-
impulses kind
I don't know
of-
you're getting your
No,
illusion.
not-
The
not
government is not
fall.
going to fall.
Oh yeah, yeah,
It's not going
indeed,
to fall.
democracy,
You have your illusion.
Okay, Timothy, just wind up.
I wanted to show you something, that in as much we borrowed to appreciate our prayers,
Organize the
To organize.
games.
to
Not-
organize the
not
games.
appreciate the
But
players.
in Uganda, there are sectors that are even given a tremendous sum of money when actually these sectors do not matter. They matter, but they do not matter a lot to Ugandans. These people, sometimes it is called unclassified budget. Unclassified budget. Because look, like this year, the State House was given a tremendous sum of money, which actually doubled 5 times that was given to Malawi and a national referral hospital. Now, if you look at that money that is so-called unclassified and how it is always given, and then you tell me that when it comes to things that matter, things that one uplift talent, things that two bring engagement of the citizens, there we want to borrow. Then there it actually makes no sense. I think her point of view was not about her agitation is not about appreciating the players. It is about borrowing to organize
to
something.
sustain an image that we can't
image.
even.
Yet actually there is money that is always so-called unclassified, and it is always tremendous, and it goes to sectors that do not always matter to the natives. Look, when we go back to the budget, I don't want us to dwell so much on football and lesser things. When we go back to the budget, we have to concur with the fact that security matters. We want to be secure. But then in the intervening period, in the period when we want security, now we want to have health sectors that are functioning, fully functioning, to the extent that when COVID-19 as a pandemic comes and a foreign country has not actually come in to do donation, at least a country can get away with sustaining itself for at least 1 year or 5 months, so that the other countries that come in should come in at a later stage, but not letting health be there to the extent that if a pandemic comes, we have nowhere to start from. In the intervening period, we have to have an educated group of people. We cannot be secure when our people are not educated. Like at first I told you about the cries that were there of teachers on strike, students who are not actually studying, but the very students, something that was very interesting. I had a little sister who I went home from the university and phoned home. I asked, what is teachers on strike? And when I went back home during the time of exam, they told me she's doing exams. I was like, now, what is she writing?
Right.
I did not know. So we are saying that we need security. In as much as we need security, we are saying that the government is doing too much, is giving too much security at the detriment of the natives. And this security, it is not actually giving a lot of respect and protection to the natives, to the citizens, to the civilians, but the protection as in it itself is given to these people that actually give it a lot.
Okay. Brian, let us move the conversation to, the budget, of course, was passed, cognizant that we have elections coming up in 2026, in a few days from now. And I just want us to shift the gears and talk about, one, the primaries that happened in NRM. I want us to talk about the nominations of the presidential candidates, but also the nominations of members of parliament. But also in that conversation, we shall capture it as the democratic journey of this country as towards 2026. I also would love us to, have a look at the EC's supplementary budget. So in your submissions, you can then conclude and say whether Uganda has made significant progress as a democracy, or have we regressed as a democracy?
Thank you, Drake. One, let me start with the last question. We've progressed as a country democratically. Why is that I do not believe in the explanation of regression in democracy. I think per election cycle, people wake up and more people pick up interest. So I think we've progressed. Reason is, in Uganda's history, more than ever before, in 2025, we had the highest number of presidential aspirants that Uganda has ever seen.
One side.
At the point of them bringing back papers for nomination, that's a different story. But at the point of picking nomination papers, we had
Close to 38.
Even
close
at
to
that-
38
Oh,
presidential
even
even
aspirants.
at the
yeah?
point of showing interest.
So to me, that is, yes, whereas some of them, you know, but to me, that shows that people are actually taking this thing serious. And whereas, yes, most of them did not bring back, and this election is we are going to vote very soon. I think by and large, that shows that as a country, we are moving forward. What I didn't agree with is, and what I still don't agree with, are what would you call them? I think the conditions that are set in regards to, one, who qualifies to pick presidential forms. I want to believe that the Electoral Commission, and this is just my personal thinking, I believe that the Electoral Commission has by and large joked on matters of parliamentary proceedings rather, as well as presidential proceedings. Why? I've always been in the school of thought that if possible, if it is possible, coming the next election cycle that will happen after 5 years, we should have sort of an amendment into that act and set guidelines and say, for you to pick, this has always been my school of thought, for you to pick a presidential form, you should at least have a minimum of a master's degree. That has always been my thought. Reason is so that we get out of this jokery and putting this country at tantalus, because
president
we
wouldn't
practically became a
qualify.
laughing stock.
The president wouldn't qualify.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. In the next election cycle, in case we're actually serious about it, to at least put a minimum and say the bare minimum at least should be a master's degree, which I think we may not ever see coming to light. So let's start with what is there. The amount of the money to be paid, we've had critics about it, but the amount to be paid shouldn't be paid at the point of view that you've been nominated. I've always believed that this money should be paid at the point of view that you even went to pick the form. So that we know that guys who are coming to pick the form are not jokers. These are business people, these are guys who have their money, and we are getting out of the cluster of every Tom, Dick, and Harry can come and pick up presidential forms. Because whereas our democracy is moving, at the global scene, we look like jokers. I'll give you one example. I'll give you a number of examples. One, we had a fresh university student, a fresher picking up nomination papers to be a president.
Form 6.
A Form 6, let me just make it very clear. A Form 6 leaver. I'm not against that because, you know, it gives you courage. But I'm against the integrity of the process, the integrity of the country. A Form 6 leaver picking up. Yes, the discussion will be that, you guys removed the age limit, right? But really, what are you going to discuss? You had the Boda Boda Association coming up and getting someone to spearhead them. And the gentleman came with a clear manifesto for the Boda Boda riders. But this is a presidential situation. You had the gentleman who came, the one who made a number of rounds. He had boots and then a short. You know, it beats my understanding, actually. But luckily enough, I'm also very glad that EC at the end of the day, I think, sat down and rectified its madness and got us 8 presidential candidates. To the quality of their integrity, that is for voters. Me, I know my candidate who I will vote. So that is one. But then to go to, so for the presidential elections and whatever cycle has been happening, that is theirs. Ours is to come and vote and sort of pitch what democracy we want. To the issue of parliamentary elections, one, I think I want to disagree with what the NRM has done. It is very, my view, it is not a good thing having a number of unopposed people coming through. I think it beats, yes, you're going to compete against other people, and now they're competing with people from other parties. But you see, the whole purpose of primaries is that if we are all in the same constituency, give us a chance to battle each other out. Let us battle each other out, ideologically and whatever. But do not come and say Aroho is unopposed. And then it's not one constituency, it's 2 constituencies, it's 3, it's 10 constituencies. That means, by and large, in the next election cycle, we might actually have half of these people coming through unopposed. That means, if the person is like from Western Uganda, we are very sure this is going to be the next MP. Because, I mean, unless God gives sectors like Western Uganda, Northern Uganda a chance to breathe, I think if you're NRM and you pick the flag, you already know you're passing through.
Right.
Which to me does not amount. But then also what I didn't agree with was the youth election cycle. From the onset, we had a lot of slander happening in the year 2025. We had a lot of nudity happening in the year 2025. That is just youth election cycles. We had a lot of intimidation happening in the youth election cycle, because some people were saying they were recommended by the president. Other people are children of so and so, which is a big discussion in Uganda, but I do not agree with that, to the fact that you see break-we-are age mates. If we can do this in the age bracket of 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, how about then when we are in our 40s? That means we are at the point of, I can actually kill you because I want a seat. And not just because I want a seat, it's because my mind no longer thinks, so I want political rewards and the related. So to close it up, democratically, Uganda, we have a lot to learn, which as Ugandans we do not want to learn. That one we've agreed. We want to move on. We want, what is the word? Chigati, twagala chigati cha lero. And that discussion, I think, by and large, in our age bracket is stopping us from thinking, is making us run to NRM because we want to pick the flag, just like what you're seeing. But either we are going to vote for them because some of them are our friends. We are going to vote for them. And some because they are relatives, and others because the party said we vote for this person. So sadly, that is how we vote in Uganda. The people who are going to go and vote His Excellency Robert Sentamu Kyagulanyi just because it is whatever red ticking and other related candidates, whatever red ticking, and don't ask. And the other people who are going to vote and say, the NRM has been here for long. This is my auntie, this is my father, this is my sister, this is my in-law, this is my friend, this is my ex, but I'm voting them because of that. And there are other people who are just going to say, man, it doesn't really matter. I mean, whether I vote or not, we all know who is going to be sworn in. So we still have a lot to learn.
Right.
Thank you.
Allow me go to the break. I'll come back to you, Kojo and Timothy, to give us your quick thoughts on the democratic journey, whether we have made progress or regressed, and then we shift gears to the regional and international scene. Otherwise, this is the Youth Roundtable. Let's go for a short break. See you in a bit.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break. Just before we went into the break, we've been discussing key events that went ahead and made the year 2025. But also we're having a conversation about our expectations of the year 2026. In the first half of the show, we are looking at a national level, key significant events that made the year 2025. We looked at the Supreme Court ruling in the Kabaziruka case that, of course, gave, later on we see leading to events in the UPDF Act. We went ahead and we also talked about the budget, on a question of priorities. And just before we went into the break, we were looking at the democratic journey of Uganda, whether we have made progress or whether we have regressed. And Brian had made his submissions as regards to that, and he says Uganda has made significant progress in regards to our democratic journey. So the same question will go to you, Kojo and Timothy. But let me start with you, Kojo, and then I'll come to Timothy. Then we can move the conversation to just quickly talk about Uganda's constitution and party that happened in 2025, and then we take the conversation to the regional and international level. Kojo.
Democracy, I'll begin with defining what democracy is. Democracy is a situation where people participate actively in the way they are going to be ruled, who rules them, and what the law is, basically, right?
Yeah.
So we're seeing people actively participating in the state of the nation. We are seeing people voting, coming in to vote, making lines, even if it is as crazy as it seems. But I am of a view that democracy can never progress when the nation is still uneducated. Yeah. In 2025, in December, we saw Mathias Walukaga, a prominent person who has his money, but he was not allowed because he was simply not educated. And we were seeing so many youths coming in and trying to fight that. And I'm saying it's all about education. When people come in, and yes, you can participate, but if you're participating from an ignorant point of view, you can never really make democratic changes in the country. He mentioned people voting people because he's my auntie, my friend, he's from the ruling party, which are not reasons which are not really reasons why people should come in and vote. Recently, I read a quote that said that in a country where people are free to live as they want, they will imitate each other. And we have seen this happening in the country of Uganda, where people are just voting flags, like you mentioned, Mwolaba red ticket or something like that. And that can never be democracy. Democracy is when you make a cautious decision to choose and elect who you want to be in power, how you want to be led, basically following the law. And we can never have that when the country is ignorant, or when Ugandans are still selfish, for God and my stomach, which is not official, but it has been actually applied, as we have seen in the recent years. So my point of view is that you can never really have democracy when people are ignorant, or when people are still imitating each other in deciding who is the leader. Okay. And another point is that you can never really have democracy when people are imitated or intimidated into voting for certain people.
So in a nutshell, would you say our democracy has regressed or progressed?
I would say it's static.
Static.
Yes.
So static at which point? Static at a point of
regression.
Regression.
Yes.
Okay. Timothy.
Yes, please.
Has the democracy in the year 2025 made a progressive upward mobility or a regressive turn?
In my own opinion and my own view, I think democracy in 2025 has made a regressive turn, because look, in a country where very many things are happening, every person is allowed to actually exercise their democratic rights in courts. We are looking at a country where the question, first of all, I want to start from where he ended on the question of who is picking nominations and what the Electoral Commission has to do about it. For my thinking, my own opinion, that is not a question to be addressed by the Electoral Commission. This is a question to be addressed by the government. This is a question to be addressed by the legislature, because in a country where it is put clearly enough that a senior 6 candidate is good enough to contest, then I think if at all I have what it takes, nothing can stop me.
Yeah, that's what I said. We should have an amendment.
We should have an amendment, and actually I think the Electoral Commission has tried to do significantly in its part, but still the blame still goes to other sections which ought to have done things credible. But the entire democratic part of it and participation of citizens in Uganda is actually alarming, to the extent that people, as you said, people are still voting because of uncertain reasons. Now, democracy in itself presupposes that, by the way, the biggest part of democracy does not go to who is contesting. the biggest part of democracy goes to is looking at the contestant. Because I remember as a student of history way back in the Philippines, there was this guy called Ferdinand Marcos who had ruled that country the way he ruled it. And then history records that he loses power at a certain point and comes this lady, Imelda Marcos. No, sorry, Corazon Aquino. And this Corazon Aquino states it clearly and says that the definition of the term democracy, in remembrance to Abraham Lincoln, as a government for the people, by the people, and for the people, is a good thing. But if the people do not know what they want, then the government they constitute is nothing but a confederation of fools. And I think when we look to that, you can tell that the democracy in this country is alarming, where people still vote for reasons like, this one is our person, this one is a nope, whatever flag are taking. This one gave me a what to take. That even people are no longer conditioned to think that this road with potholes, now that for me I do not have a car, it is good that this road be put right so that when I get sick at night, someone can rush me to the hospital. They don't think about that. They think, what have you given me today? And in Uganda, it has become very difficult to convince people that ideas can count than that what you put to them. I've seen people coming to make rallies, they make speeches, reasonable speeches, and they wax eloquent and tell people what they are going to do to them. But after all is said and done, we hear our electorate sometimes and more boldly tell them, you've spoken well, we've heard you, but please conclude. In as the more you've spoken, we've not seen your conclusion yet. Conclude. And the conclusion they are talking about is that conclusion.
Passing of the throat.
That is the conclusion they are talking about. And when you look at all that, you look at what is even transpiring within the country. Look at what security is trying to do. However, in this election, security has tried to keep a neutral ground. However, as security and as politics, it is always, it sometimes goes extreme, but it has tried to do something that portrays them to be neutral. I don't know if there are guidelines.
Security.
All right. Let's just quickly, as we shift gears, Aruho, quickly on Uganda, the constitution at 30, and of course, as you make your quick remarks on constitution at 30, let us look at the president's statement that takes us now to the regional conversation about the Indian Ocean, which was much more of a remark that was alluding to the East African integration question.
Thank you.
Indian Ocean.
I think the president's submission is not binding. It's only but submission. It becomes another issue when it's put into policy. But fast forward to Uganda at 30. I mean, our constitution at 30. I want to say Uganda has a very good constitution. I think that is something I've come to agree over time. As effective as the black and white and the document. We have a good constitution. We've had significant progress in the amendments of the constitution, by and large. But to the effectiveness of the applicability of those respective articles and the related is where we have an issue. But as far as the articles, the Bill of Rights, we have a very good Bill of Rights, which is properly stipulated. We have very good black and white and the document itself. The constitution is really something very powerful in Uganda as far as the paperwork. As far as implementation, and we discussed this, I think our constitution at 30 as far as implementation has always been to what angle do I benefit? And I would like to bring this in I think by and large, the article that gives you the movement political system, that sort of try to bring in the multi-party politics in as effective as what our democratic sphere is, the jurisdiction. It sort of limits, it gives you an array into, this is an open field, let's all come and play the match and see the winner. But you see, when you deeply read that movement political system article, it then gives you a little bit of hindrance in as far as it gives the movement political party a lot of power. That is one. Secondly, you look at You look at our Bill of Rights, Chapter 4. I think by and large we have a very good Chapter 4 as per the East African jurisdiction, with an exception of Kenya's Bill of Rights. We have a very good Chapter 4, a very, very well-grounded Chapter 4. In as far as how it has been applied, you've seen in 2025 we had Chiza Aaron, Advocate Chiza Aaron, have his share. Before 2025, in the year 2023, we had a lawyer. Then he was still a law student. Kakwenza Ruchiragashisha run out of the country. You had in 2025, in as far Chapter 4 is concerned, you had the president of the Uganda Law Society, Advocate Isaac Semakade, run out of the country. You had still in the year 2024, cutting to 2025, a Supreme Court judge run out of the country. In as far as just Chapter 4.
Yeah.
This is a Supreme Court judge running out of the country for her own security purposes. You had, towards the end of 2025, that same judge come out and make a statement as far as judicial independence and Chapter 4 applicability in the country. I think that is very alarming. You have people that had come from Kenya into Uganda and then were termed political figures and then were put under political, what you'd call imprisonment and target, come in the country and get locked up and later are deported from the country. You had the term political prisoners come up very much. That is as far as only Chapter 4. You had people like from the NUP, Eddie Mutwe, who was picked up and there's no ruling yet as far as was picked up from place A and then is had in place X, and then it gives you a stretch of as far as court hearings. Do you listen to someone from a different jurisdiction? You had, I think 2025 has really tested our question of Chapter 4 as far as its applicability. You had, there was a very funny case that was in High Court. The name is going. Molly Katanga's case come through, which I think also by and large tested applicability of the law in Uganda. Now, it then gives you, then you had obviously now the famous Kawaziruka case, which then cuts into how fast the UPDF Amendment Act came through, which then also now gets us to the thinking of, okay, Field Marshal Idi Amin Dada, interestingly, a number of years made a statement, which people I think took lightly, that you have freedom of speech, but I can't guarantee it after. Now, we have our bill of Chapter 4 telling you have freedom of speech, but then we're asking ourselves, in case yes, we have, can I still stand on that ground?
Can I guarantee that right after I've made
after you've made your statement, after you've put up that beautiful Twitter post, X post rather, after you've made that TikTok video, we saw TikTokers have their fair share. There is a gentleman, that Munyankole boy, who got his fair share in Mbara High Court. So to the end of Uganda, our constitution at 30, we've had significant progress as per amendments, as per the black and white, as per the beautiful decoration of the constitution. But as far as implementation, I still want to believe largely we've had independent selection of articles.
Okay.
Especially freedom of speech. Secondly, freedom of association.
All right, so shifting the gears to the issue of integration and looking at the statement of the president and then connecting it to what we also saw in Tanzania with the events that happened with Mama Suluhu. And of course, looking at all that from an East African perspective, but also as an East African, not just as Ugandan alone, as an East African, the significance of Tanzanians' fingerprints in Uganda's democracy. Of course, history has it clearly, the role it played in trying to give us the democracy that we're enjoying today. Now, looking at the events that later on happened on the streets of Tanzania, therefore makes us ask the question of, is the region entering in a state of, should I term it as a state of darkness, whereby human rights are gravely stepped upon and democracy is taking a different hold altogether? Let's just quickly reflect on that and we can move the conversation to the international level. I'll start with you, Brian, as I come this side.
All right, thank you so much. As I want to believe, as East Africa, Tanzania has always been our model into how leadership should actually run and are related. Not until Mama Samia Suluhu, I did not know what happened, but I think it was a very great turn, especially for 2025, because one, Tanzania has been looked at. We've had the likes of senior Mwalimu Julius Nyerere and everything they did in relation to the East African integration into the East African community. I think it was, I still want to believe that Tanzania has always been a model to Kenyan politics and Ugandan politics, by and large, those two countries.
Yes, it has.
And sadly, we had youth go on the streets because of one, CCM coming out, I think a number of months before the election cycle, when one of their prominent political heads was put in on grounds of treason. And then you had a very funny election cycle, a resemblance of Uganda, but with a certain 10% increment. And then you had the military coming in, the police coming in, beating up these guys. Then you had the president swearing in very quickly, no public communication, people are there, and oh, hey, she swore in. She swore in as president. I think it gives us a question of, one, how effective is the East African community leadership? Secondly, is the East African community leadership only a community as per paperwork or even in terms of work? You're having Tanzania, and we debated this before, Drake, you're having Tanzania paying more attention to COMESA and SADC, and little interaction with the EAC. So is it still part of the EAC? Or does it have priorities elsewhere? I think it still comes back to priorities. The East African community should be a very good thing. I think in terms of economic play, in terms of political play, and in terms of social play. Because Tanzania beats all of us in terms of space, jurisdiction.
Territorial jurisdiction.
Territorial jurisdiction. So it has a big leverage into how trade is done because of the imports. But it also has a very big play into how people can live. I mean, because it's also the center of Swahili. So it should have been, my view, it should have been at that top tier point. But I don't think it's too late. The East African community can still sit in. I firmly believe that President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni with President Williams Ruto, Ndayishimiye, President Ndayishimiye, President Paul Kagame, President Felix Tshisekedi, and President Samia Suluhu, I still believe that they can sit and have these things harmonized, just the way Uganda and Rwanda harmonized their issues in 2021. I think it's the same way they can handle this. Uganda has had a number of conflicts with Kenya, cross-border, but because of trade, and they've been handled. I don't think that a little spark can kill the community, really.
All right, Kojo, your thoughts on the Tanzanian question?
Thank you so much. So, for me, I think it is my personal view that this is the poison of being in power. We see that we have been looking at Tanzania as the model state, referring to Tanzania as, when we're looking at the ideal leadership, but that can't exist when a country serves or creates laws that protects the leaders. You get? You find that in East Africa, now the problem is no longer about the country, but the problem is about the law that protects the leaders. You find that once a president has been sworn in, they have too much power. And the power is only in the hands of the people during election period, which is also kind of like a myth, considering the power of election is not in the people who vote, but in the person who counts the votes, you know? And that's also a problem. Now, it is a poison that has affected the East African community. You know, when you look at the East African community as a whole, the idea and the entire purpose of it all is actually very beautiful. Find that when it collapsed in 1970, we had to revive it again simply because it was a very good idea where we were now standing together as a community to trade, to make sure that our people can cross these boundaries or these borders and continue to interact with each other. But now, considering the things that are happening with the East African community, that's where you find the president making statements like the Indian Ocean, among others, because it is now a shaking thing. It's now a shaking idea. Now, you mentioned that Tanzania was supposed to be at the head, considering its but in the East African community, the entire purpose of the community was to level the ground between these landlocked countries like Rwanda, Burundi, and these countries that are near the ocean, so that it's more of a friendship, socialism, and something like that. But considering the rampant disregard of human rights among these citizens, among this community, where you find that people in Kenya can now cross to Uganda and not be termed political citizens or political what? Prisoners, among others, because they're all like, because they strike better, having a Kenyan in Uganda now is dangerous, and that is the poison. It all comes back to the poison of leadership.
All right, Timothy, what are your thoughts on the Tanzanian question?
Now, for me, my thought in the Tanzanian issues is that we actually have to let history inform some of the factors. In a way that Tanzania all over long has been a model state to East Africa. That one, I agree with it.
Including during COVID, its actions during COVID were actually very inspiring and very beautiful to the African countries at large.
Yeah, starting from when Julius Nyerere had to shape Tanzania and had to help Uganda shape Uganda, and to ensure that East Africa unites. When Julius Nyerere attempts to delay its independence so that these countries can all be together at one time. And then other things come in, and what has actually killed these countries is that people, when they get to power, they get used to the trappings. They get used to power, and you know that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I think in East Africa, as a community, people are getting corrupted and are getting used to the trappings of power, that they all feel like we are contented with having with what we have. I better be a president in Kenya or in Tanzania or in Uganda than being a minister of the entire Kenya, which has only one president. That is what I feel. And to like how we said, my brother, that it is not too late for these people to come and harmonize. But I want to tell you that in East Africa, the problem is some people are serious, but the regrettable part is that some people are serious alone. Yeah, some people are serious, but some people are serious alone. Now look, like in Rwanda recently, when this government removed the travel permits, I'm sure you have read about that. You can realize that at least Rwanda, since Kagame's time, it has tried to be significant, to relate to integration. But like I said, some people are serious and others are serious alone. And the other thing is, I don't always believe in people who pretend to be supporting the idea of integration, because people are just making integration just mere rhetoric and speeches. But when it comes to action implementation, they don't do it. Look, in 2020, in 2003, there, the president of this country, Uganda, I think he empaneled a team that had to make a survey all over Africa, all over East Africa, to go to the social workers, to go to the political workers, to go to the businessmen, to go to students, to go to the lay leaders, to come with a clear overall verdict if Africa needs integration. And when these people go all over Africa, they come and have a report that suggests that the people of East Africa want integration urgently. But after that, it stopped there. It stopped there. Like, people on grounds of speaking and show them that we really want integration. But when it comes to them to actually work towards integration, they don't. Recently, I had the president of Kenya, William Ruto, when he went to the UN summit, I think he delivered one of the most interesting speeches that I've ever heard from a president.
But that's all we do. We deliver very good speeches.
Very
and do
good.
nothing.
That is what I'm talking about. I said, I think he delivered one of the most interesting speeches I've ever heard from a president talking about integration in global stages, to global people and to international wide. But the question is, after that speech, what do you have to do on grounds so that it can relate to your words, it can relate to your letters you write?
Yeah.
And that is the very big thing, that as a people, we are always confined to looking at these people and to feel like these people are doing reasonable way to integration. It also goes back to a problem of lack of satisfactory education, where people do not have a sense of discerning to tell that this one was done this way, but it is intentional to this. Now, look, when we come to the president's statement of the Indian Ocean, I think what made it look more of a problem to East Africa, it is because of our sense of discerning, of how we relate to someone's statement. When I make a statement, how do I relate to it? Because geographically, demographically, and politically, I don't see where the Indian Ocean belongs to Uganda as a nation. But when we go to international law, to international procedures, a country like Uganda has a right to access and use the Indian Ocean because it is within their region. But now we have had challenges from over time between Uganda and Kenya. And you will look, when Uganda was having that tunnel, the oil tunnel that passed through Tanzania, I think the safest way to where it would have passed would be Kenya, because it is the shortest. But because of their internal conflicts, it would not pass there. They would not agree. And I think the president's statement was just a diplomatic statement, just to trigger the sensibilities of the Kenyan authorities to come on table grounds for diplomatic talks and legitimate talks.
All right. So as you now wind up, give us your expectations for 2026 and your concluding remarks.
My expectations in 2026, we are expecting to have a country and actually a region that is more unstable in as accordance.
That's your expectations.
That is
Stability.
That is my expectation. that is what we look at. And I cannot expect, because if you tell me what I want, I think the question of expectation is different, the question from what I want and desire. The expectation, no, it cannot be the same thing literally. Okay. What I want might be different from what is the expectation, because the expectation is informed by by the status quo.
So what are your expectations? Just straight to that.
My expectation or what I want?
Okay, whichever.
No, the expectation of the future of 2026, we are likely to have governments, to have nations that are unstable. We are likely to see, like for instance in Uganda, we're likely to see post-election unrest, where every person now will be claiming to have won elections. The no people will be claiming that they did reasonably well. The NLM, of course, they are the ones who will claim it, I'm sure of that. They will also have their say. And we are likely to have post-colonial unrest. And this post-colonial unrest will actually be tapped on. It has to be handled. And that is...
Thank you. Kojo, you want to give us something else?
It's okay.
It's okay. Kojo, what are your expectations of 2026?
Thank you. So it's like you're predicting which party is going to win.
He knows the reality.
But my expectations
I'm
for
not predicting,
2026 are based on what we've gone through in 2025, because you know, history terms the future.
Right.
Now, considering the people's outcry, the public outcry that has been, you know, spoken out loud in 2025, it's more of a wish that those outcries are actually implemented. And I expect in 2026 that we are going to have a better budget. We are going to have clarity concerning the education system, of the payment of the teachers. I hope and I pray that maybe more roads are going to be built. Of course, the usual, but of course, my expectations in 2026, there are more of wishes. Peace.
That's why I said that expectation is different from what you want.
Mm.
There is what you want, and that's why you wish that we
Yeah.
should have budgets that actually relate to teachers,
To
that
the
define
people.
the teachers' needs,
Yeah.
that we should have stable countries. But we cannot expect that when those things
Have not
ahead
been-
will be informed by the status quo.
Okay.
There will be agitation and conflict of a certain unique kind, which is caused and relating to what is happening today. We all wish to see a future where 2026, where teachers have to go back to class and teach without
because they are being
because
paid
they are
enough.
being paid. We all want to see a post-election period where every person is contented and satisfied with the electoral
Very
commission.
peaceful too.
Very peaceful. That is what we want and desire to see. But the expectation is totally different because it is not informed by like that.
Yeah. But considering our past, I'm expecting too much violence.
Right.
I'm expecting people to cry. So many people are going to be disillusioned. A few people are going to run out of the country,
Yeah.
Yeah.
considering the past of the country. But if I'm to be positive, I'm expecting that the public outcries concerning the teachers, the health centers, the
If you have to be positive or if you have to be wishful.
wishful thinking that is going to be implemented.
Brian, quickly, your expectations and concluding remarks.
My expectations I think are normal. One, I expect government to put an increment in 2026 and 2027 budget, especially on 3 sectors: health, education, and public service, which then inform the running of the country. I also do expect that the two questions of ESC and AU will be addressed, in as far as the leadership of the AU is going to change this year, in as far that most of the East African states would have then settled, gotten out of the election madness, and towards media, I think we are going to have stability and then a continuation of trade. But I also do expect that after the swearing in, we are going to have now the normal political harmony, the coming back into the sync of we are past elections, we are now into economy, we are now into trade. So I do expect a little economic repression between this month, January, February, March, and then we shall have an uprise of our financial stability back again towards when the budget will be read and passed. So that is my expectation. But then closing, I want to urge fellow Ugandans that at the end of the day, regardless of the political party you're in, and regardless of the person you support, we're all Ugandans at the end of the day. So it is paramount that you campaign for your person peacefully. It is paramount that you vote for your person peacefully. It is paramount that you also respect the choices that other people make. If someone says my candidate is the one under NRM, I think it is key that you let them exercise their constitutional duty to vote their person. If you support NUPs, vote for your person. If you, and the other those parties, the other opposition parties, I think at the end of the day, the fact that we're in Uganda, we ought to work together. One, because political indiscipline is only for a limited time. But when we undergo phases that the country has gone through, I do not think it makes us a better community. Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian, Kojo, and Timothy for the wonderful discussions. It's been lovely having you on the show, particularly in the first episode of the Youth Roundtable of the year 2026. It's been lovely. I've loved all your submissions, and of course, I wish all of you a happy new year. And to our dear esteemed viewers, of course, it's a new year, and a happy new year to you as well. And to our production crew, Paul, Malcolm, and Brittany, for always ensuring that this show airs right on time, for you, our dear esteemed viewers, to always catch up and get to know what's going on and what is happening with the young people's views on Youth Roundtable. But to the Center for Constitutional Governance for always bringing this conversation and giving young people a platform, thank you very much. Of course, my name is Douglas Trekonem, and this is the new year. This is the Youth Roundtable. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye bye.